What's up, guys? I'm Chris Spags here, back with another Four Corners video for today's 13-game NBA slate, courtesy of Osmo.com. There are a lot of games today, and I might be bleeding from my ears right now trying to process all the information out there. So like this video right now and leave a comment down below. Tell me which guy you like the most on today's slate. There's so many options out there, so you know what? Just pick a guy. Tell me who you like the most. I will, of course, jump in there later on to answer any questions you have, and I will announce the winner of yesterday's little contest we had in the comments later in the video. The first corner I want to hit on is a game with the Hawks visiting the Magic. This one has a 225.5 point combined total, which represents a 10.3 point boost for Orlando and a 4.5 point drop for Atlanta. The Magic are still playing for a playoff spot, and Nikola Vucevic is the engine driving this team right now. He's had 63 and 55.5 fantasy points versus Atlanta this year. Again, the game matters. Vucevic does everything. He looks really strong here. He's at a good price, so Vucevic is one of my stronger plays on today's slate, just because you know the game is important to him. Aaron Gordon's going to be a viable Vooch pivot if the ownership is high. I wouldn't play Aaron Gordon in a lineup with Vucevic because the rebounding upside that Gordon needs to have a big day does cut into Vucevic's opportunity. I'm okay playing Evan Fournier with Vucevic, but Aaron Gordon, I think, is a guy who would stand alone in lineups if you are trying to play some Magic guys today. For DJ Augustine, this is a nice spot for both scoring and assists, but his run has been down a bit recently. Michael Carter-Williams breathing down his neck, taking some minutes away, and DJ Augustine not really showing a ton of upside, so I think there's some risk to Augustine. Augustine looks fine. Michael Carter-Williams may be a bit of a sneaky value play, especially if the Magic somehow blow this one out. And Terrence Ross had 39.5 fantasy points versus New York last game. We've talked about it time and time again. He can take you to the highest heights, or he can leave you in a fiery pit in the ground with his performances. This is a spot where you can certainly get going, but there's enough guys where you could get going where I wouldn't want to have a ton of Terrence Ross. A little bit of tournament exposure, though, does make sense. Trae Young at 63.25 fantasy points versus Philly last game. He's going to have all the usage he wants here as he continues a Rookie of the Year campaign, which is likely out of his hands, but he's still trying. Trae Young going to have a lot of opportunity today if he wants to take it. It's a tougher defensive matchup, but I like Trae Young here as the guy who can keep this close for the Hawks if it is a situation where this one doesn't blow away. John Collins will also have some more usage today with Kent Bazemore and Kevin Huerter out. John Collins has been really good with Dwayne Dedmon out. That's the main guy who impedes his progress from where I see it. So Collins to me looks strong here. He had a nice day versus Philly. It's a tougher spot versus the Magic, but his price still works for me. So as long as this one is close, John Collins is a guy to have in a few lineup builds that include Magic and Hawks guys. Alex Len saw his minutes down last game, but he wasn't really needed in a spot versus Philly where there wasn't a Joel Embiid in the lineup, so his size wasn't a necessity. Versus the Magic, it may be more of a necessity here. There is some risk Deonta Davis takes minutes away, but I do think Alex Len is going to get at least a shot to get going here, and I don't mind him here at a reasonable price. Justin Anderson is in play for me again with Bazemore and Huerter out. Taurean Prince is expected to be in the rotation. He's probable right now, even though he's also a bit banged up, and Prince is a viable play, but I think Anderson has a bit more of a ceiling, also at a cheaper price. His price has come back down after his big day versus Milwaukee, so Justin Anderson, a guy who interests me quite a bit here, assuming he's going to get the run. The next corner I want to hit on is a game with the Heat visiting the Wolves. This one has a 218 point combined total, which represents a 4.4 point boost for Miami and a 4.7 point drop for Minnesota. You're probably noticing a theme with these first couple picks, and the Heat are another team who are playing for a playoff spot right now in the East, and Goran Dragic is the first guy I'm going to look at. He's had at least 37 minutes and 15 shots in his last few games since Josh Richardson went out. The opportunity's there for him. He had a dud last game versus Boston, shot just 3 for 15, but he did get that 37 minutes, and that's what we're looking for here. The spot versus the Wolves, who are a terrible defense, really could see Dragic spike a major upside with both scoring and assists. Bam Adebayo's had over 40 fantasy points in his last 2 starts, and though his price is rising, he is still playable with a nice matchup here. The Wolves also giving up 11.3 offensive rebounds a game, so that should benefit Bam Adebayo. It's a nice spot for him here, and I don't mind going to him. Again, though, that price a little bit high. Hassan Whiteside could also kill with the same reasons. Again, just a not great rebounding team on the Minnesota side. Whiteside has had 38.75 fantasy points in 2 out of his last 3 games, and he needs to get those 20 minutes to get there and be hyper-productive with his 20 minutes to have that sort of output, but he can certainly do it in the spot, so I don't mind Hassan Whiteside here at a reasonable price, which gives him a nice ceiling. Dion Waiters has been over 22 shots in 2 out of his last 3 games. He's banged up a little. He had a knee injury, which needed an MRI, so there's some risk going to him, but again, that opportunity is really hard to ignore in a team who's playing for a playoff spot, so I don't mind Waiters here. Karl Anthony Towns hasn't spiked a big day in a while, and this matchup versus Miami doesn't seem on paper like one you'd want to go to, but he's bigger than Bam Adebayo. He's more athletic than Hassan Whiteside, so he should be a good matchup for the Heat on paper. It's a nice spot for him given the fact that his opportunity, his minutes have been there, so Towns, I don't mind as a probably contrarian center play. And Andrew Wiggins has been steady at his price, but he's lacking that tournament upside. He's actually been hitting value at his elevated price, which is a bit of a surprise for Andrew Wiggins, but with so many guys out of the Wolves rotation at this point, the usage is there for him. He could spike an upside day. I don't know that I see it. I think if you're trying to force one of these guys to run it back with the Heat side, I prefer Towns, but Wiggins, a guy who you could have some exposure to if you are playing a bunch of lineups. Next corner I want to hit on is a game with the Grizzlies visiting the Mavs. This one is a 220 point combined total, which represents a 5.2 point boost for Memphis and a 3.4 point boost for Dallas. This one doesn't fit the playoff criteria area, but Ivan Robb is in a good spot here. Jonas Valanciunas and Joakim Noah are both out again. Robb had 32 fantasy points in 31 minutes with no bigs last game. It probably says it all for the fact that the guy is in a t-shirt in the photo that we have here. It's the only one available on our photo website, but Ivan Robb is a good per minute player. He's been under 1 fantasy point per minute all year. Just a solid guy to have in there. And again, the 30 plus minutes are what matters here versus a Mavs team who's not motivated to win right now and also doesn't have a lot of bigs of consequence in the rotation. Delon Wright and Tyler Dorsey are both reasonably priced plays for this matchup with the Mavs with no Mike Conley in the lineup again. Delon Wright's a safer play. He's also got a little more upside. Tyler Dorsey hasn't been getting there recently. He's also been losing minutes to Chandler Parsons, so there's some risk to him. But as a tournament play, I think he's in play completely. Delon Wright would be the guy I prefer. Tyler Dorsey in the mix. Even Justin Holiday not totally out of the mix, but a slate of this size, I feel like we can find guys a little more upside elsewhere. Bruno Caboclo would be interesting if he starts, but he didn't start last game with Julian Washburn picking up the start for reasons unclear. Washburn, not a very productive guy. Caboclo can be productive if he gets the opportunity. So if Caboclo is in the starting lineup, I would have some exposure to him because he does have the ability to put up a big day, especially versus a Mavs team who has nothing defensively to offer right now. Luka Doncic is currently questionable, but he's very playable if he's in. People probably won't go there because of the Memphis matchup, but this is a very different Memphis team now, obviously, with everybody out of the lineup who was what defined Memphis prior to that. So Luka Doncic, a guy I like quite a bit today, as long as he's in the lineup. And if he's not, Justin Jackson should pick up some usage, and Trey Burke would pick up a lot of minutes and become a very interesting punt play. Dwight Powell had 44 fantasy points at under 1% ownership last time out. He was needed in that spot as a defensive play against Karl-Anthony Towns. That won't be the situation today, but the minutes should be there for him as long as he's in. He's questionable right now because he may get a rest day, which would not be great to play him in. If he is out, Salah Mejri becomes a better play, but if Powell's in, I would want to have some exposure. And with so many games and so much weirdness on this 13-game slate, we're at the end of the NBA year where things go sideways in a million different ways, I'm just going to give you guys some notes on a variety of things that I find interesting right now. Willie Cauley-Stein is out for personal reasons, and one would expect this means bigger opportunity for Marvin Bagley. He should be a good foil versus Utah. We just saw a similar player in Bobby Portis have a 64.25 fantasy point day. Even if Kosta Koufos picks up the start, I think Bagley ends up taking the lion's share of the minutes from Willie Cauley-Stein. So I like Bagley quite a bit here now that we know that Willie Cauley-Stein is going to be out of the lineup. And in that same game, Rudy Gobert looks really strong with Derek Favors still out. If Ricky Rubio is out, Donovan Mitchell and Joe Ingles get a little more appealing, so I'd watch the news in this one closely as we get closer to lock. Denver versus Portland is also an important spot right now. Houston's just a half game out behind them. Portland not far behind that in the number 4 slot, so this is a situation where Denver needs to win. Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray would be the first two guys I would go to. Damian Lillard doesn't interest me that much because the Nuggets are really trapping and defending lead guards really well all year. I'd rather go to Enes Kanter. I also think the wings for Portland may have some value because if Lillard doesn't score, those guys have to, but Jokic and Murray would be the two guys I like the most in this situation. In Detroit versus Oklahoma City, both teams are playing for their playoff seeding, and it should be a competitive spot, so I like Paul George and Russell Westbrook. Again, anytime they're in a spot where the game is expected to go 4 quarters, you can trust that they're going to have some value. The spot versus Detroit, a little bit tough defensively, but as long as they're on the court, putting up fantasy points, it's really all that matters, so I like both of them. On the Detroit side, Andre Drummond would be really interesting to me if Blake Griffin is ruled out. He's questionable right now. Reggie Jackson would also gain quite a bit of usage. He's had 3 straight games over 35% usage recently without Blake Griffin in there, so those guys are in play to me, but only if Blake Griffin is out. Emmanuel Mudiay and Kadeem Allen are both out versus Houston today. We also have Dennis Smith and Alonzo Trier questionable, so who is going to take the lead point guard duties? I'd watch the news closely because if it's Dennis Smith or Alonzo Trier in there, those guys would get quite a boost overall. If those guys are out, Billy Garrett, a DePaul alum who's at the minimum price and has just been signed by the team recently, should be getting point guard minutes. You could also see some more usage for Kevin Knox. I also like whoever is starting out of Luke Cornett and Mario Hezonja. The Rockets are a gigantic favorite right now, so it's very likely to be a blowout spot, but any of these guys could have value today. There's a ton of usage to go around without Mudiay in there, so I'd watch this one closely, closer to lock. Gordon Hayward's a very interesting play in his return to Indiana if Marcus Morris is out of the lineup. Both Morris and Jaylen Brown were out last game for Hayward. He had a monster day, so Hayward here could be in a nice spot. His return home, he's been rounding back into form, so Hayward a guy I would like quite a bit, though Morris being out would make me like him significantly more. Spurs may not get a lot of love with ownership today, but they are also playing for playoff positioning. LaMarcus Aldridge, DeMar DeRozan, and Derek White are in a great spot versus Washington today. On the Washington side, I wouldn't be playing any of the stars. Bradley Beal sat in second and fourth quarters of last game as Coach Brooks told him that he's not going to be playing as much down the stretch while they give the younger guys some run. Beal will still keep playing and starting because he's trying to get all 82 games for the first time in his career, but you could see more usage for Thomas Bryant, for Jordan McRae, for Troy Brown, and Sam Decker. I like those guys in that order because they all seem like they're going to get big minutes down the stretch as the young guys here who need to build experience. Phoenix versus New Orleans has the highest team total on the slate at 233.5 combined points, and without Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton out there, Josh Jackson and Rashawn Holmes look like strong plays. Elie Okobo should also get some love as a value guy, but I would prefer to go to Jamal Crawford actually if he's in the lineup. He was a surprise scratch last time, but they may just need him from a body perspective. So Okobo, Jamal Crawford, and Jimmer Fredette all in play for Phoenix for me. But Josh Jackson and Rashawn Holmes be the guys I consider safe. And on the other side, Christian Wood is also still interesting to me, but there is some risk. Julius Randle, I don't know what he's doing. His price is really high. I don't trust him, but he's definitely impeding Christian Wood's opportunity at minutes. So the New Orleans side, not as appealing, but the Phoenix side, probably a necessity to have in some lineups. And the Lakers and Clippers game is a 230-point total, which is noteworthy, but the Lakers are a disaster right now. They got blown out yesterday. I would assume that Rondo and JaVale McGee keep getting run for the Lakers, and if so, and this game stays competitive, those guys do look pretty good. If it becomes a blowout, you're going to see more minutes for Jonathan Williams. Alex Caruso actually will let up a little in a blowout and let Isaac Bonga take over lead point guard minutes. So if you're playing a blowout build, I would go with guys like Bonga, Jonathan Williams, Mo Wagner. If you're playing a competitive build, I would go with Rondo and McGee. On the other side, Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell, and Danilo Gallinari are all a bit interesting for the Clippers, but there is some risk of a blowout. And I also don't mind Shai Gilgeous-Alexander if Patrick Beverley is ruled out again. His price being up makes him unplayable unless Patrick Beverley is ruled out again. So there we go. Those are my thoughts on today's 13-game slate. And as always, there are more down in the link description down below. My column to Switch and Hedge on Osmo.com has details on all 13 games somehow. So I really worked hard today. So please support that by clicking the link. And drumroll, please, the shout-out winner of yesterday who guessed correctly that the Lakers were going to lose by a certain amount to the Warriors. Alex the Great right here guessed it on the nose, 18 points. Looked like it could have been a 60-point loss at some points, but the Lakers closed it. So congrats, Alex the Great. You truly are the great. And get involved in our little community here. Like this video right now. Leave a comment down below. Tell me who's your favorite play on today's slate. Could be anybody. Get creative with it. If it's Billy Garrett and you're right, I will give you the biggest virtual pat on the head you could possibly have. So like this video right now and leave a comment, as well as any questions you may have for me. And last but not least, for slates like this especially, use that promo code Switch and Hedge. Get half off your first month at Osmo.com. You can still get an NBA pass because we'll have that content going throughout the playoffs. You could also get an all-sport pass, get NBA, MLB, MMA, PGA, really all the acronyms you can put together. NASCAR, which is also an acronym, even though it doesn't sound like one. So use that promo code Switch and Hedge and get in there right now for half off your first month. I'll be back on Monday with another Four Corners video, and hopefully they make it a little easier on me. So have a good weekend, guys, and good luck.